Good morning, Digit fam. Adam Dowd here after an unexpected day off doing hard labor. I'm back. The Advil is flowing. This podcast not sponsored by Advil. And I'm all caught up on the Apple event, and now it's time to talk about just what we saw. And there's a lot to talk about, so strap in. This is going to be a long one. And here I am just making it longer. So without further ado, it is March 26, 2019, and this is your Digit Daily. First, I'd like to assure you that everything about the Digit Daily happens locally on your device. I don't actually exist. I'm generated on your device automatically. There is no cloud-hosted file that you download. We have no idea how many people listen to the podcast. Oh, and just one more thing. That's all complete horseshit, but we'll get to that in a second. Apple isn't happy with just getting your money once for the latest iPhone. It wants your money over and over again, too. Welcome to the services company. Now, to be fair, if a company could talk you into buying services monthly, that's a nice, sustainable business model. And I'm not faulting Apple for that. But let's break down what Apple wants your money for, and we'll start with Apple News and Apple News Plus. This is the magazine/newspaper service that we've talked about in the past. $10 a month gets you 300 magazines and a couple of newspapers, none of which are from Chicago. But there is a Toronto Star, which is basically the second city, so I guess it's close. 300 magazines, most of which have their own subscription fees, is a good deal. I won't deny that, but getting 300, I don't know, let's call them channels of content for a monthly fee? Well, what does that sound like? I'm a cord cutter, by the way. Next up is the Apple Card, and about 95% of this presentation was about how the card works with Apple Pay. Only at the end did they mention, oh, by the way, it's an actual card too. This was the one thing of the entire presentation that an Android user can use, but why would they? You get 1, 2, or 3% cash back on all purchases, which seems nice, but also isn't really that incredible a deal. CNET and a former Visa executive both break down the terms and conditions, both linked in the show notes, and they're both enlightening. In general, it seems like it's a decent deal, if you have an iPhone, but there's another thing to talk about here. And we'll circle back to that in just a little bit. Because next up we have Apple Arcade. This is a pretty straightforward subscription model that gets you access to 100 or so games that you can play. Blah, 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 allows developers to build great ideas, blah, 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 whatever. $10 and you can play a bunch of games. Just one thing of note to point out here.
And unlike streaming services, every game will be playable offline.
Wow, Google Stadia, shots fired. Moving on. Finally, Apple TV and Apple TV Plus. Basically, Apple TV has been updated to be just like the old Apple TV, and that's basically it. It was literally the same announcement from like 2 years ago. They did add on smart TV and set-top box integration, coming to Samsung TVs and Roku, and that's cool and all, but the app basically does what it always did. Apple TV Plus is Apple's original content, and this is where the presentation got weird. They played a long montage of directors and actors from Steven Spielberg to J.J. Abrams to Ron Howard to Jennifer Aniston, all talking about telling stories and yada yada yada. Then, for some reason, they brought out celebrity after celebrity to talk about the project that they'd been working on. It never ended. It was basically one long name drop. They never gave any more detail about Apple TV channels, which was
only the channels you want, on demand, ad-free, for the entire family.
And honestly, that's the part I wanted to hear about. But here's the thing. Overall in the presentation, Apple kept ramming the, quote, this all happens on the device, and with the credit card, they said, Apple can't see what you buy, and with Arcade, they said,
Apple Arcade games cannot collect any data about you, nor track any information about how you play their games without your consent.
And then they said,
you'll be able to play Apple Arcade games across iPhone, iPad, Mac, and Apple TV, and pick up where you left off in a game, even if you switch devices.
So in order for any of this to be possible, servers have to be involved. So for Apple to say,
Apple Arcade games cannot collect any data about you, nor track any information about how you play their games without your consent,
is disingenuous at best. Now, the difference here might be that without your consent part. But are we talking about this app developer wants your reports and feedback type of consent? Or are we talking about GasBuddy location data consent? Because those are both consent. The difference is in the transparency. And for the Apple Card, Apple said,
so features like spend tracking and categorization all happen using on-device intelligence, not on Apple servers.
All with a gigantic PowerPoint slide that said, quote, Apple doesn't know how much you paid for it. But then they said,
with Apple Card, if you have a question, just text us right from messages. Everything from getting details on a transaction to letting us know your new address.
so how can customer service help you with transaction details if Apple doesn't know how much you paid for it? Now, look, folks, this is all splitting hairs. I get that. But this privacy rhetoric that is spewing out of Cupertino with every commercial, every public appearance, and every press release just doesn't mean squat unless Apple is clear with you what is going on. Apple knows all this stuff. Apple knows everything you do on your iPhone just as much as Google does. The difference is with what happens to that data once Apple finds out. And maybe Apple doesn't do anything with it at all. Maybe Apple hired a team of monks to transcribe everything that happens on your phone and then cast that parchment into the fire, never to be seen again. I kind of doubt that, but the point is this. First, Apple has that data. As much as Tim Cook wants to say it doesn't, Apple has it, and this presentation today proved that over and over again. Second, you don't know how that data is received, nor do you know how it's stored. They will probably never tell you. Or if they do tell you, it'll be part of a terms and service that you won't read. Especially if it actually does go to a team of monks, because come on, bro, that's just weird. Third, that privacy policy can change tomorrow, and there won't be a thing you can do about it. And finally, none of this matters. It's anonymized, and for the most part, chances are that the data that you're sharing in some way makes your life better. Except GasBuddy. GasBuddy. And finally, I don't want to seem like I'm harping here, but it would be really swell if Apple would open up all these services to Android. I mean, they're pushing Apple TV out to Roku, but not Android? In all seriousness, I saw nothing in this presentation that I would actually want to subscribe to, but it would be nice to have the option. And by the way, I'm typing this on a MacBook with an iPad sitting on my desk next to me. I'm not an Apple hater. But it seems like ignoring 2 billion with a B other consumers in the market that happen to have Android devices seems like a bad business strategy. But what do I know? So now that we've all been hit with that knowledge bomb, let's head on into the roundup! Okay, so I'm going off book with this first one because it wasn't in the newsletter, but this is a PSA. If you are a T-Mobile subscriber, open your T-Mobile thanking app today and you'll get a season of MLB.TV for free. It normally costs $120, so this is a bit more than the usual Dunkin' Donuts gift card. You're welcome. Huawei's P30 event came and went as I wrote this podcast script, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow, but the star of the show is the camera setup on this bad bammer jammer. We're talking a 4-camera setup in the back, including a 5x telephoto lens that lets you zoom in on all the action. We're still digesting the event for a bit, so we'll get into a lot more detail tomorrow, but for now we'll say that the gap between a phone and a DSLR camera just got a little bit smaller. Speaking of Apple-like rhetoric, that is. Google Maps will now let you set up public events on the map so that you can invite the general public to your shindig. You can set things like event date, time, details, etc., and let people just come a-flockin'. This implementation seems to be a bit unfinished at the moment, and Google needs to be really careful with this. It'll be very easy to have events cover up details of a city you're actually trying to navigate because you don't happen to care that the Happy Puppy Theater Troupe is having its weekly meetup at the Sizzler. McDonald's is buying a personalization and decision logic company to help clean up its god-awful digital menus that allow you to place your own order and keep just one more burger flipper unemployed. Which is nice, except for the burger flipper. The fact of the matter is, these self-order menus are getting more and more popular, and McDonald's is looking for a way to make them not suck, and I can respect that. But it won't change the fact that I still only order breakfast at 7 p.m. when I'm absolutely forced to eat at McDonald's, which are the only circumstances under which I would actually eat at McDonald's. The EU has passed the unfortunately vague copyright protection directive that has been fought over for the last couple of years. Basically, the main points of contention here are the ability for content creators to charge a sort of, quote, link tax when a website shows a snippet of their writing. Giving credit will no longer be good enough, and I have to wonder how this is going to affect the Digit Daily. Anyway, also, upload filters will become necessary to filter out copyright material from a user as it's uploaded, putting the onus on websites like YouTube and Facebook to stop copyrighted material from being uploaded in the first place. It'll take another 2 years for all of this to be written into actual laws, and by then we'll all be brains in jars anyway, so I guess it really won't matter all that much. But today, it kinda sucks. Our friends at the Electronic Frontier Foundation believe that the U.S. needs a plan to bring high-speed broadband internet to every home in America. What the EFF doesn't understand is that the U.S. already has a plan, and it's called Comcast. The only thing is, hell no. But the reality is that still, most of the US has none or only one broadband choice, and that isn't helping anyone. Plus, the US still defines broadband as 10 megabits per second, which I guess is technically correct, but technically a tiger is also a kind of feline. It doesn't mean you want it stretched out on your sofa. And finally, NASA says to nap, and NASA is smart. NASA's data shows that the perfect length for a power nap is around 10 to 20 minutes, just enough to get into the first 2 stages of sleep. That's enough to make you more alert and help you power through the rest of the day. Personally, I like to take all of my power naps in a row, like 10 or 20 of them, but then, of course, I might be missing the point of the study. But now that we're all revived and alert, that's going to do it for today's Digit Daily. If you'd like to learn more about any of these stories, check out the links in the show notes and subscribe to our daily newsletter on digit.com. And if you like what you heard, subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast player. And don't forget to share the show by sending your friends to digitdailypod.com. Once again, I'm Adam Dowd, Dead Technology on Twitter, and we'll talk again tomorrow.